Hello and welcome to my show, Shuvra Deb with you, with me, your host, Shuvra Deb. In this show, I will be discussing mental health with the aim of raising mental health awareness in our community and in society as a whole. The genesis of the show is my own pivotal life-changing experience of being in a Category 5 hurricane back in 2017. That experience led me to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. I am hosting this show in order to let you know that you are not alone if something life-changing has happened to you from which you are struggling to heal. Shuvra Deb with you focuses on a range of topics relevant to mental health and to raising awareness of issues surrounding mental health. Hello everyone and welcome back to my show, Shuvra Deb with you. I hope that you are all doing really well. I just want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to my regular listeners out there. I can see that the podcast is gaining traction and that you guys are tuning in. Without you, the listeners, there is, of course, no show. And I am truly, truly humbled and thankful for you guys taking the time out of your busy schedules to listen to what I want to say about mental health, which is a topic that I am deeply passionate about. On a daily basis, I see the incremental effects on people where they are suffering a mental health issue or they're just not taking care of themselves in a productive way. And it's by me talking to you and other shows like mine that together we can make a change for the better, for all of us to live better, happier and healthier lives. As you all know, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, my show is about raising awareness around the topic of mental health. I do want us all to be living in a society where looking after our own mental health and the mental health of those we love and care about is no longer stigmatized, as is currently the case in society. I want us all to live in a world where we no longer make that distinction between mental and physical health, and where each and every aspect of our health is considered in an inclusive and holistic way. Whilst my show is about raising awareness around the issue of mental health, I do want to make it clear at the very outset that I'm not a mental health professional and I'm not a medical doctor. If you do need to seek professional help, then I wholeheartedly encourage you to do that, and we have a great number of options here in the Cayman Islands where you can reach out for support. Infinite Mind Care provides counselling services and can be reached on 926-0882. The Alex Panton Foundation offers support to people up to the age of 30, and their information is on their website, alexpantonfoundation.ky. Loud Silent Voices also provides mental health support, and their number is 922-3847, and their email is info@lsv.support. And as always, I love hearing what you guys have to say about my discussion topics, so please do reach out to me at shuvradeb82@gmail.com, spelt shuvradeb82@gmail.com. For those of you listening live on the radio, and if you've missed any of my episodes so far, please do head on over to my podcast, which you can find on Spotify, Apple and Google. Just type in Shuvra Deb with you. The with you is spelt WITHYOU. Moving on to what I am going to talk about today. Today I'm going to talk about maintaining our mental health on a day-to-day basis, which is not something that we all should be doing or should be thinking about doing. On the contrary, maintaining our mental health is a daily activity in which we all must participate if we are to live happy, healthy and fulfilled lives. Dr. Gabor Mate says in his new book, The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness and Healing in a Toxic Culture, which I've finally managed to get my hands on, which I'm thrilled about. Dr. Mate says in his book, health and illness are not random states in a particular body or body part. They are, in fact, an expression of an entire life lived, one that cannot, in turn, be understood in isolation. It is influenced by, or better yet, it arises from, a web of circumstances, relationships, events, and experiences. Brian Dyson, the former CEO of Coca-Cola, gave the 172nd commencement speech to an audience at Georgia Tech in 1991. Commentators have since referred to the speech as the 5 balls of life, and it goes like this. Imagine life as a game in which you are juggling 5 balls in the air. You name them: work, family, health, friends, and spirit. And you're keeping all of these in the air. You will soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it will bounce back. Now stay with me, listeners. Remember, this speech is coming from the man who was Chief Executive Officer of Coca-Cola from 1986 to 1991. And just as a side note, Coca-Cola has a brand value globally of $74 billion US. You can't really get much bigger than that, so stay with me. The former CEO of this huge company says, "But the other 4 balls, family, health, friends, and spirit, are made of glass. If you drop one of them, they will be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. They will never be the same. You must understand that and strive for balance in your life." And as part of that balance, I see that we must take care of our mental health. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that we shouldn't care about our work, that we shouldn't pursue our work tasks with passion and with valour. On the contrary, each and every client I have had as a lawyer, particularly in England as a barrister, where quite often I would be the lay client's only representative on the day in court, I have deeply, deeply cared about and committed my entire energy to that client for that case. I'm not saying not to care about your work, and neither is Brian Dyson saying that. The point here is that there are certain aspects of our lives that if we don't look after and protect those aspects, they will be irrevocably damaged. Health is the main one here. We develop a chronic condition, let's say, as a result of chronic stress. It takes a lot of work to come back from that. We develop type 2 diabetes as a result of decades of not looking after ourselves properly, of not being healthy. Whilst we may be able to manage our symptoms and condition with a renewed lifestyle and dietary regime, the condition will remain in our bodies. Another aspect of our lives that will suffer great damage if not cared for is our family life. If any of us drops dead tomorrow, our employer will have found a replacement for us within a month, maybe 2 at most. Our families, on the other hand, they will never be able to find a replacement for us. Or we allow our spirit to become saddened and heavier as the years go by, weighed down by our negative thoughts about life, which then snowball into bigger and more profound negative thoughts. By doing that, we put ourselves at risk of being that person that no one wants to be around, that no one wants to talk to, not even our kids or our spouse. And that's just a very, very sad state in which to live. So what are some of the things that we can all do to help ourselves and those we care about to maintain a healthy, balanced state of mind? Something that I am a huge fan of is having what I call a mental health check-in buddy. What this is a relative or friend, someone who you trust, who trusts you to be there for you when you're going through a tough time. Your mental health check-in buddy will be someone with whom you feel comfortable to share details of any particular situation, emotion, or a combination of both that you're going through, and vice versa for them. So if you've shared with your mental health check-in buddy that you're going through some difficulties and that they're really getting you down, your buddy will be someone who maintains regular contact with you. Even if that means a simple text message in the morning, just to see how you're feeling, to say, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And I speak from experience on this, that quite often waking up to that message or seeing it coming in just after you get back from the gym can make the world of difference. By seeing that message, "Hey, how are you doing today?" we are reassured that our friend is thinking of us and our welfare, and we know that we matter. Because, of course, we do matter. Everybody matters. It's just sometimes we all need a reminder that we matter and that someone somewhere cares for us. And when your mental health check-in buddy is going through a tough time themselves, we do the same for them. Send a quick text in the morning. "Hey, just wanted to check in with you. How are you doing today?" And I have found that a question is always better than the passive version of that sentence, which would be, "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay." For someone who is struggling with something, being asked the question provides, in my view, a deeper connection with the person sending the message, not least because it requires a response from us, given that it is a question. The only thing I would say to watch out for with this one, though, is to not become codependent, where, for example, you start to rely entirely on the other person, or where you start to use each other as each other's dumping ground for all of your woes. That will only lead to unhealthy patterns and most likely ultimately the breakdown of the friendship. So, kept within healthy bounds and with boundaries maintained, a mental health check-in buddy is a great kind of friend to have around and a great kind of friend to be to someone else. An obvious tool for maintaining a healthy day-to-day state of mental health is often the one that is most overlooked, and that is the importance of sleep, and in particular, the importance of healthy and good quality sleep. There's a great article online called Mental Health and Sleep, written by Eric Sooney of the Sleep Foundation based in Seattle, which has been reviewed by Dr. Alex Demetriou, a psychiatrist. The article lays down a long list of mental health benefits from getting proper sleep, stating that sleep is tied to a number of specific mental health conditions and neurodevelopmental disorders. The article states that around 75% of people who suffer depression also show symptoms of insomnia. Equally, many people suffering with depression experience excessive daytime sleep or hypersomnia, which is sleeping too much. The article states, historically, sleeping problems were seen as a consequence of depression, but growing evidence suggests that poor sleep may induce or exacerbate depression. The difficulty in identifying clear cause and effect reflects what is believed to be a bidirectional relationship in which sleep problems and depressive symptoms are mutually reinforcing. In other words, a bit of a chicken and egg situation of whether the symptoms of depression cause poor sleep or whether insomnia causes depressive symptoms. In answer to that question of which one comes first, depression or insomnia, either one can be the starting point, says researcher Patrick Finnan, PhD at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Finnan says, poor sleep may create difficulties regulating emotions that in turn may leave you more vulnerable to depression in the future, months or even years from now. And depression itself is associated with sleep difficulties, such as shortening the amount of restorative, slow-wave sleep a person gets each night. If you are listening to this and feel that you can relate to what I'm discussing, please seek professional help. You may be someone who doesn't want to take medication, for example, and you may not have to, or you may find some meds that work for you. But the most important thing is to not suffer in silence, and to at least tell a friend or family member if you're not quite yet ready to seek professional help. Another mental health issue that the Sleep Foundation article discusses is anxiety, saying, anxiety disorders have a strong association with sleeping problems. Worry and fear contribute to a state of hyper-arousal in which the mind is racing, and hyper-arousal is considered to be a central contributor to insomnia. Sleep problems may become an added source of worry, creating anticipatory anxiety at bedtime that makes it harder to fall asleep. Similarly, with PTSD sufferers, the article states, researchers found an especially strong connection between PTSD and sleep. People with PTSD frequently replay negative events in their mind, suffer from nightmares, and experience a state of being on high alert, all of which can interfere with sleep. And all of which is exactly what I experienced when I was suffering with PTSD. So what can we do about this? Naturally, every person's situation is different, and every person will respond differently to different treatments. If you are experiencing chronic insomnia, which is affecting your day-to-day life, I do strongly encourage you to seek out professional help. One of the treatment modalities that could help with sleep is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT, at its very simplest, is treatment that involves efforts to change thinking patterns. And there are, of course, practices that we can participate in at home. Some of the obvious things are, well, obvious, but they are helpful, so it's worth setting them out here as they are set out in the article. The Sleep Foundation article states that examples of steps that can be taken for healthier sleep habits include having a set bedtime, finding ways to wind down with relaxation techniques as part of our standard routine before bedtime, avoiding alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine in the evening. For example, I try to make sure that my last cup of tea is by 3 p.m, as I'm usually heading up to bed at around 8 or 9 p.m. to be up for 5 or 6 a.m. I also try to avoid alcohol in the evenings. Of course, the bedtime routine and alcohol avoidance can go completely out the window when I'm out in the evening having dinner, for example. But even with that, a little bit of a good thing is better than too much of something. So I will try, and I don't always succeed, but I will try to go out only once in the week and once at the weekend. And whilst that may sound restrictive, that balance, when I'm able to achieve it, that discipline, has exponentially improved the quality of my sleep, my work productivity and quality, my exercise experience, and my life generally. Other ways of having a good bedtime routine are having dim lights and putting away electronic devices an hour or so before bed. In addition, getting regular exercise and natural light exposure during the daytime helps immensely. Maximizing comfort and support from our mattress, pillows, and bedding also helps, as does having a right room temperature. And blocking out excess light and sound that could disrupt sleep is important too. One of my best ways of falling asleep and staying asleep is to read a book before bed, and an actual book made of paper with pages. By reading from our phones, laptops, or other devices, we actually risk keeping our brains awake due to the blue light that radiates from these devices. And that's because they have the effect of suppressing melatonin. Melatonin controls the sleep-wake cycle. Harvard researchers and their colleagues conducted an experiment comparing the effects of 6.5 hours of exposure to blue light against exposure to green light of comparable brightness. The blue light suppressed melatonin for about twice as long as the green light, and the blue light shifted circadian rhythms by twice as much, by 3 hours as opposed to 1.5 hours. So instead of scrolling on my phone or working in bed on my laptop, I try to find a nice book that will relax me. Not a book about trauma research, for example, but a book that has a nice story. That's something really good to read just before going to sleep. And I do feel the difference. The nights when I am scrolling on my phone or sitting in bed bashing out ideas for my next show or for something else, or those nights when I don't bother with any bedtime routine and just fall into bed, or those nights when I've had one too many glasses of wine, those are the nights I get my worst sleep, which then affects me negatively for the entirety of the following day. The Sleep Foundation article makes another really good and valid point. Finding the best routines and bedroom arrangement may take some trial and error to determine what's best for you, but that process can pay dividends in helping you fall asleep quickly and stay asleep through the night. So as with many things in life, finding what is best, what works best for us, can be a process of trial and error. With that, it's important to remember not to get down on ourselves or put ourselves under pressure if the sleep techniques I've discussed are not working. If something doesn't work for you, that's fine. You've tried it, it hasn't worked, move on, try something else. Another way to maintain a good state of mental health and balance is to avoid the need to be perfect. In fact, don't just avoid it, get it right out of your life altogether. I have a saying that I love sharing with people, so I'm going to share it with you guys. Done is better than perfect, because perfect never gets done. Done is better than perfect, because perfect never gets done. How many of you resonate with that? We stay up late, we keep plugging away at something, trying to make it perfect. But in that process, how much of an actual improvement are we really making to the piece of work or to the project? At some stage in the pursuit of perfection, we end up with diminishing returns. Sacrificing our peace of mind, giving ourselves anxiety and poor sleep quality in order to be perfect at something or to produce something perfect is a loser's game. Not least because there is no such thing as perfect. Perfection does not exist on any objective basis. One person's view of something being perfect won't match another person's ideal. My view of a perfect sunset will be different from yours. My feelings of having had a perfect lunch out with my friends will differ from the view of the very same friends with me at the very same lunch. I may have had the delicious al dente pasta dish, and my friend may have had the plate of soggy, overcooked ratatouille, each of which will likely colour the entire experience differently for each person present at the same table. So, in pursuing the perfect piece of work, or the perfect look for our bodies, or whatever the pursuit might be, when we present that piece of work, for example, to someone else, their view of it will differ from ours anyway, upwards or downwards. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about the story of Dr. Lisa Rankin in his book, The Myth of Normal. He describes how, by age 33, Dr. Rankin was taking multiple medications for a number of conditions, including 3 drugs for high blood pressure and palpitations, antihistamines, and a steroid, which is a stress hormone, and weekly injections for allergies, which, she was told, she would have to stay on for the rest of her life. Dr. Mate continues, "Today, Dr. Rankin is fully healthy and takes no drugs at all. In her case, healing owed nothing to conventional medical treatment and everything to the personal transformation she was guided to undertake, a journey she began when at age 35 she was nearly suicidal." Dr. Mate then goes on to say about Dr. Rankin's recovery from seemingly unrecoverable maladies. Her key insight was to recognize her entire life as the ground for her several illnesses, physical and mental, not separate entities, but dynamic processes expressing her interactions with the world. Dr. Rankin is quoted in The Myth of Normal as saying, "I had been a stereotypical good girl, overachiever, top of the class, always pushing to develop my talent and intellect, not to satisfy me, but to be accepted by others." Dr. Mate says of this, that relentless pressure she learned manifested in her medical conditions. She had to let it go. 2 things essentially arise out of this. Firstly, that the strive for perfection can quite literally make us ill, physically and mentally. And secondly, for whom are we trying to be perfect anyway? In other words, why are we doing it to ourselves? There is, in my view, nothing wrong with wanting to be good at something. Being the best is another thing, however. With most things, there will be someone who is better at some of the things that we do, and likewise there will be someone who doesn't do some of the things we do quite as well as we do them. But that doesn't stop us, and neither should it stop us from aiming for our best output. But all of that has to be done in balance. It has to be done in balance with our mind and spirit, such that the striving doesn't give us debilitating anxiety, such that the aiming high doesn't give us high blood pressure, such that the output doesn't lead to chronic insomnia. And we are our best judge of where that balance lies. The way we find that balance is by listening to our bodies, by observing signs and symptoms. When we find ourselves having sleepless night after sleepless night, for example, that is the time to take a pause, to ask ourselves what is causing this, to identify what is causing our insomnia, and then to take a step back from that thing. As I said earlier, we drop dead tomorrow, our employer will have easily replaced us within a month or 2. Our spouses and our children, on the other hand, not so much. Their lives will be irrevocably changed, and not for the better. The second point, for whom are we trying to be perfect anyway? If, like Dr. Rankin, as she identified in herself, we are doing what we are doing not to satisfy ourselves, but to be accepted by others, whether that's our family and their expectations or what we think our peers expect from us, then we're doing what we're doing for all the wrong reasons. One of the best ways I have for overcoming this one, and I can tell you I spent a lot of time trying to please others. The child of Indian immigrants, so much value was placed on achieving high grades, on getting a first-class degree, on getting a highly paid job. And then legal practice in London, there was so much quiet competition between my peers as to who had the largest brain with the capacity for the best legal argument on something that would trump everybody else's point. And that wasn't even in the context of adversarial litigation. That was quite often in the context of a group of people sitting down, chewing the cud with one another. So trust me, I've been there. It's not fun, and it's definitely not fulfilling. So, what view do I now have on why I am doing something? I ask myself whether what I am doing is of service, whether that's service to a community or service to a boss, for example, because by doing something for them, I am helping them, or whether it's service to myself for pursuing something which I'm wildly passionate about. As soon as we take perfectionism, and therefore by definition competition, out of the picture, as soon as we stop comparing ourselves to other people, as soon as we stop trying to beat someone else at something, and as soon as we start to ask ourselves, how may I be of service in respect of this job, task, or pursuit, our approach changes. We go from clambering, climbing, beating, competing, which can quite literally lead to mental or physical illness. Just ask Dr. Gabor Mate, the expert in this. We go from that to doing what we do from the perspective of something much more positive. We're not trying to knock someone else down to cross the finish line first. Instead, we are trying to build someone else up by helping them, by providing a service to them. And in that process, we may well end up achieving something great that perhaps we didn't even expect to achieve. So give it a try. Switch your perspective the next time you are tasked with something or you decide to task yourself with something. Ask yourself, how may I be of service in undertaking this task? I have spoken many times on my previous shows about the benefits of gratitude. That is, the benefits of being grateful. One way in which we can have a gratitude practice is by keeping a daily gratitude journal. A very detailed article called 14 Benefits of Practicing Gratitude, including journaling, in Psychology Today sets out the many benefits of having a gratitude practice. It states that one study found a decrease in materialism amongst adolescents who kept a gratitude journal. Those participants also donated 60% more money to charity. Another study found that eating habits became healthier amongst undergraduate students after they completed a gratitude writing exercise. Wong and Brown, in a 2017 study on gratitude, found that showing gratitude went beyond just saying thank you, for example. The Psychology Today article states that their study involved putting students into 3 different groups. Students in the first group were instructed to write a gratitude letter to another person every week for 3 weeks. The second group wrote about their thoughts and feelings, but in relation to negative experiences they were having. And the third group were told not to write anything at all. In common was the fact that the students in all 3 groups received counselling whilst undertaking these practices and the study. The results were that within the first group, their self-reporting showed that they experienced significantly better mental health 4 and 12 weeks after the study had taken place. Brown and Wong then analysed their findings and found that gratitude does the following 4 things. Firstly, it disconnects us from toxic, negative emotions and the ruminating that often accompanies them. Writing a letter shifts our attention so that our focus is on a positive emotion. Secondly, the study also found that expressing gratitude helps us even if we don't explicitly share those thoughts of gratitude with someone else. We are happier and more satisfied with life purely because we completed the exercise. Thirdly, the positive effects of gratitude writing compound like interest. The study discovered that we might not notice the benefits of a daily or weekly practice immediately, but after several weeks or months, that is when we will start to see the changes. And fourthly, a gratitude practice trains the brain to be more in tune with experiencing gratitude. In other words, one positive plus another positive is equal to more positives overall. I want to talk a little now about gratitude in the workplace. Amy Gordon is cited in the Psychology Today article as identifying 4 myths around gratitude in the workplace. Gordon's job is to research gratitude, and she says that the 4 myths surrounding practicing gratitude in the workplace are, firstly, that it's forced, secondly, it's faked, thirdly, it's fluffy, and fourthly, it undermines or foils authority. Gordon states that her research and studies that have been undertaken by others have found that even when workers feel forced to, for example, start a gratitude journal, the benefits are still there, and they are still felt by those workers who feel forced into it. Those people reported being happier, healthier, and more satisfied with life. The second myth is that gratitude in the workplace is faked. This myth can be busted by saying thank you to a co-worker when they genuinely feel thankful for something that the co-worker has done. And along with being genuine in our gratitude, in saying thank you, we are invited to be specific about what exactly it is that our co-worker has done for us, for which we are grateful. Gordon, I think, quite astutely says that this can feel fake or corny, but she suggests switching it around. How would we feel if the other person was to say thank you for something we had done, and then to say specifically why they are grateful? For example, thank you for running out to fetch me a coffee. I appreciate you noticing how busy I've been, which has made it difficult for me to go out and get that coffee. Being specific and viewing the gratitude comment from our own perspective if someone was to say the same thing to us, provided that it's said with genuine intent, takes the perceived sense of it being fake out of it. The third myth is that gratitude in the workplace is fluffy, on the basis that perhaps, unless you work in a ball pit for adults, workplaces are serious places with serious enterprises, so why waste time on cute fluffy things like gratitude? Gordon, the expert on gratitude, says of this, that gratitude is, at its core, about feeling valued by others. Gordon cites a study where office workers were questioned, and 66% of them said they would leave a company if they felt unappreciated. When workers are in a stressful, busy environment, that is the time that feeling valued is even more important. It allows workers to see the benefit of their time spent and invested in being busy and stressful. Essentially, it keeps them going. And the fourth myth about gratitude in the workplace, says Gordon, is that it undermines or foils authority. On the contrary, Gordon cites a study that found that leaders who express gratitude inspire trust. And a worker who trusts their boss, their leader, is more likely to go the extra mile to ensure that the work is done and that it's done well. Leaders expressing gratitude were also seen to have more integrity. The worker who considers their leader to have integrity is much less likely to question that leadership. They are much less likely to question the directions or instructions given to them. A grateful leader is also more likely to have workers who actually want to do the job, because the workers feel valued when they do what they have been asked to do. And essentially, the employee remains engaged. My regular listeners amongst you will know that I am a huge fan of spiritual practices. I meditate almost daily, practice yoga as often as I can, and I try my best to see everyone and see the world from a lens of love and oneness. That all sounds very nice and Pollyanna perhaps, and for the skeptics amongst you, we now have scientific evidence that having a spiritual practice of some description boosts mental health and overall life experience. I've recently started following Arianna Huffington's newsletter called On My Mind, which is available on LinkedIn for those of you who'd like to check it out, and I recommend that you do. In her newsletter from 6 February 2023, entitled One Big Question on My Mind, Huffington writes about a book by an author and medical doctor, Dr. Lisa Miller. The book is called The Awakened Brain, The New Science of Spirituality and Our Quest for an Inspired Life. In that book, Huffington quotes what Dr. Miller says, which is that MRI imaging of the human brain has shown that we as humans have a neurological drive for spirituality. Dr. Miller writes the following in her book, as quoted in Huffington's newsletter. When we engage these perceptual capacities, when we make full use of how we're built, our brains become structurally healthier and better connected, and we access unsurpassed psychological benefits, less depression, anxiety, and substance abuse, and more positive psychological traits such as grit, resilience, optimism, tenacity, and creativity. Dr. Miller gives a TEDx talk called Depression and Awakening, Two Sides of One Door. She says in her talk that depression and spirituality are two sides of one door seemed well within the realms of science. She goes on to pose the question, where is depression in the brain? Where is depression as the porthole of the spiritual path? And upon undertaking case studies, she found it in broad and pervasive regions of the cortex. Dr. Miller goes on to say that for the same areas of the brain that atrophy with depression, for the people with depression who had a strong spiritual practice, there was a thickening of the very same regions of the brain's cortex. Dr. Miller compares the way the cortex looks in these people to a tree trunk with a trunk as thick as if it was in the Amazon, as opposed to a tree that is thin from the cold. Dr. Miller also found that depressed people with spiritual practices gave off a wavelength at the back of their heads. They gave off the alpha wavelength from the back of their heads, which is the same thing as one may find with a meditating monk. Going deeper into this, Dr. Miller's research found that the alpha wavelengths coming off the back of the head of these people who had depression and were spiritual, and off the back of the head of the meditating monks, was the same wavelength as what is known as the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance is the natural rhythm or beat that emits from the Earth at the frequency of 7.83 Hz. Nikola Tesla said of the Schumann resonance, "Our entire biological system, the brain and the Earth itself work on the same frequencies." The National Library of Medicine in the US confirms this in a paper published in 2017 called, and this is a bit of a mouthful, Synchronization of Human Autonomic Nervous System Rhythms with Geomagnetic Activity in Human Subjects. A study undertaken by the authors of that paper concluded overall that the human brain and body are synchronized and resonate with the Schumann response emitted by the Earth. For those of you who are interested and would like to read the paper, my podcast, available on Spotify, Google and Apple, contains the show notes where you can find the link to that paper. But what does this mean for us, and how can the Schumann resonance help us to maintain our day-to-day mental health? Well, one of the ways is by listening to music at 7.83 Hz. By doing that, we can experience benefits such as enhanced memory and balance in our perspective of life. We can experience improved stress tolerance and start to feel more grounded. So I welcome you to try it out. Music at 7.83 Hz. Another amazing and groundbreaking finding that Huffington cites in her newsletter is that a new study published in JAMA Psychiatry shows that meditation can be just as effective at reducing anxiety as anti-anxiety drugs. That's big news, Huffington states, given that, according to The Lancet, anxiety is the most common mental condition experienced by an estimated 300 million people worldwide. The paper was published on the JAMA Psychiatry website on 9th November 2022, and it discusses new scientific findings further to a study that was undertaken in a randomized clinical trial of 276 adults with anxiety disorders. The adults in the clinical trial undertook an 8-week treatment with mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques, that is, meditation. When compared with the effects of anti-anxiety drugs, the study found that each form of treatment was comparably effective. The research is, of course, very new and will need to be explored further. In addition, the test participants were relatively small in numbers, so more empirical data needs to be gathered before reaching concrete conclusions. But notwithstanding those limitations, I consider this to be an advancement in the treatment of anxiety and a broadening of the generalized view of the benefits of meditation. In other words, having a daily meditation practice is another avenue that those suffering anxiety may wish to explore, especially in light of the new scientific findings on its effectiveness. Following on from this, more new, really exciting research has just hit. My friend and former university lecturer, now a psychologist in England, Dr. Ishla Singh, recently posted an article from the UK broadsheet The Guardian written by David Robson, which is entitled "The Big Idea, Your Personality is Not Set in Stone." Robson sets out that new scientific research has shown that we can finally throw out the old ideas of psychiatry and psychology to do with the development of our personalities. The old ideas were centered around the notion of personality being fixed in childhood. It has been a long-held belief that our character traits and how we respond to things is formed in childhood, and there is little to no scope for malleability for the capacity to change. However, on this, Robson writes, "Recent scientific research, however, confounds this expectation of personality's permanence. With the right psychological strategies and enough effort, many people can successfully mold their core traits into the shape they desire." Now, isn't that fantastic news? For those of us who have always told ourselves, "Oh, I'm so forgetful, that's just how I am," or "I wish I wasn't so disorganized," well, for us there is hope. Robson goes on to say in his article that whilst there are a number of different ways of measuring and assessing personality, which of course there must be given the subjective nature of personality, much of the research that Robson has reviewed centres on 5 specific traits that he says are thought to comprise the most fundamental characteristics of personality. Robson says that these fundamental characteristics are known as the Big Five, and they are, firstly, extroversion. This is a reference to how outgoing and sociable someone is. The second trait is conscientiousness, which refers to how organised and disciplined we are. The third characteristic is agreeableness. which is all about how concerned we are with social harmony. The fourth personality trait is neuroticism. This is how nervous and sensitive we are. And fifthly, our openness to experience, which is about how imaginative and curious we are. Robson does say that our genes almost certainly do play a part in our personalities, and that this explains why quite often many people's personalities reflect that of their biological parents. However, Robson states that psychology professor Nathan Hudson has undertaken a series of groundbreaking studies that suggest that adults are capable of moulding and changing their personalities as they grow into adulthood. That personality development does not end in early adulthood is now a very real concept. Robson describes the studies in the following way. The study participants were prescribed regular activities that reflected the personality traits they wished to adopt. So, for example, an introvert who wished to be more of an extrovert might have the goal of introducing themselves to a stranger once a week, or making small talk with the cashier at their local grocery store. For someone who wished to be more conscientious, they might be asked to carefully proofread an email before sending it, or to write a to-do list before going to bed. A neurotic person, on the other hand, might be given exercises to improve emotional regulation, such as writing down their feelings when they threaten to overwhelm them. Robson then writes, "While these tasks may seem insignificant, the aim is for the thinking patterns and behaviours they generate to become habitual. And the evidence so far suggests it works remarkably well. In one 15-week trial of nearly 400 people, participants accepted an average of 2 challenges each week. Provided they actually completed those tasks, their traits shifted in the desired direction, according to a standard Big 5 personality questionnaire." A later experiment that took place involved a larger pool of participants. This time, 1,500 people were asked to use an app that coached them towards their desired personality traits. Those participants self-reported their feelings of how the study went, but in addition to that, and to add more objective elements to the study's findings, the participants' friends and family members were also asked to rate their personalities, both before and after the experiment took place. Robson states that the positive differences in the participants' personalities were still being noted 3 months after the study was undertaken. And all of this ties in with some of the things I've said in previous shows. Of course, I'm not the first to come up with any of this. Other thought and spiritual leaders have for decades maintained that by changing our approach to life, by developing new practices, these new aspects can become new habits, and they can become a new part of the fabric of our character. It's great that there are now scientists undertaking studies on these notions and coming up with proof for what so far may have seemed as mere speculation. This research provides even more reasons for advocating self-improvement, for advocating self-care, and for showing that these things actually work. From the mental illness and mental health perspective, Ishla has quoted this in her post from Robson's article. Conditions such as depression and anxiety are often characterized by feelings of helplessness. People believe negative feelings are just a part of who they are, and there is little that they can do to change them. This can compound the sadness and worry they face, and may also make them more resistant to treatment or making lifestyle changes that could speed their recovery. But what if educating people about their potential for personality change placed them on a more positive trajectory? A further study was undertaken by Professors Jessica Schleider of Stony Brook University, New York, and John R. Weiss of Harvard Psychology. The aim of this study was to see whether educating people on the brain's plasticity had any impact on symptoms of anxiety or depression. The professors selected a group of around 100 adolescents who had shown signs of anxiety or depression. The study participants took a course explaining the science behind brain plasticity and were shown statements from older students who reported on the ways in which they had grown over the years. The study participants were then given worksheets to consolidate what they had learnt. Schleider and Weiss checked back in with the adolescents 9 months later to be told that they experienced a significant decrease in their feelings of anxiety and depression. This was compared with a group who had undertaken a different kind of study. Robson concludes, Teaching people about personality growth is not a panacea, but these results suggest that it may be a useful tool to help build greater psychological resistance. So there we have it. Science is now confirming that as humans, we do have the capacity to change. And science is confirming what many of us have been saying for a long time, that education is the key to growth in the healing of mental health issues. By educating ourselves and others on things like, for example, the brain's plasticity and malleability, we are able to welcome in a new age of understanding that we are not stuck. None of us need to be stuck in a state of feeling bad or anxious or anything else. With the right help, guidance and treatment, we can come out of depression, anxiety, and other conditions. There is also not enough importance placed on doing nothing, on simply just being. And I appreciate that this may now sound like a bit of a contradiction, given that I've spent all of my time so far and on most of my previous shows talking about acts, talking about doing. Notwithstanding that, and in addition to the doing, we do need to know when not to do, when just to be. For the pet owners amongst us, just look at our dog or cat and see how they can just be without having to do. My two cats spend their days sleeping, eating, playing, and softly gazing at things, mostly food. They are living their best lives, having a great life and doing mostly nothing, in just being. So how do we do nothing? In a society where we are encouraged always to be doing, to be achieving, to be productive, how can we even justify doing nothing? I talked about this on my second show, Standing Still to Move Forward, by saying that it is in those moments of stillness, those moments of inaction, that the greatest inspirations and ideas often flow. How many of you find that in taking a shower, the solution to a problem pops into your head, or you get some of your best creative inspirations in the shower? It's in those moments when our brains are a little bit idle, when we are doing almost nothing, that our brains get the space in which to germinate ideas. There can be great benefits of, at times, just sitting on the couch or outside in your garden or in the local park, just sitting, doing nothing and just gazing into the middle distance. That doesn't make you a couch potato, and it certainly doesn't make you lazy. It opens up space for you to just be and to enjoy the moment of the experience of whatever it is, whether it's sitting on the couch in your garden or in the local park. And I mean really, really just sitting. Not even deliberately trying to relax or trying to meditate, not running through our mental checklist of the tasks we need to turn to at some point, not deliberately trying to conjure up the next idea or the next plan. I mean, really, really doing nothing. Maybe just go for a walk around your house or your apartment and observe what is before you. No tidying up, just observe the piles of clothing. Look at the furniture. What colour is it? If you're out in your garden or patio or in the local park, do the same thing. Be observant of the sights, the sounds and smells around you. And you can do this for just 10 minutes at a time if you start to feel anxious or uncomfortable. But what doing nothing, other than observing, will do for you is that it will allow you to be in the present moment. And by relaxing into the present moment, by just being aware of it, the health benefits come in the shape of lowered anxiety levels, lowered blood pressure, and a general sense of well-being through relaxation. Another thing that's great for maintaining a mental equilibrium is clearing out the old, which releases that old energy, and it makes space for the new to enter our lives. By clearing out from our lives, whether that's clearing out physical items or clearing out emotions or attachments that are holding us back, making us feel down perhaps, we are making space for something else. We may have a cupboard or even an entire room in our homes dedicated to nothing more than junk. These things that we haven't used for months, sometimes years, they no longer need to be there. If they're not being used, they're taking up valuable space that could be dedicated to something else. If you want to start a new hobby, for example, in, let's say, creating art, by clearing out a cupboard filled with junk, we have somewhere to store our art supplies. By clearing out a room filled with objects we no longer use or need, we make the space to create a whole art studio. The sorts of emotions we may wish to clear out are lingering thoughts or feelings for an old flame, perhaps, old resentments and grudges against bosses or co-workers, or the old reels of negative internal mind chatter about our own unworthiness. But these kinds of clearings out quite often need to be done repeatedly, and quite often in respect of the same things. That grudge we're struggling to let go of is unlikely to disappear after just, for example, one meditation or other type of ritual. Often these things can be quite entrenched, and so we need mindfully to remove those attachments bit by bit, chipping away at them over time, until they are really and truly gone. And with that, I'd like to take you through a brief releasing meditation inspired by the work of Deepak Chopra. Find somewhere comfortable to sit with a straight spine, gently closing your eyes and placing your hands on your lap with your palms facing up. Start to focus in on your breath, deepening it so that you can deepen into the practice. And as you focus in on your breath, listen to the words of the music. The Sanskrit mantra, Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, translates into English as, we call in Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. We call in Ganesh, the remover of obstacles. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Listen to the words and focus on your breath.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. 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 Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha.
Listen to the words and quietly to yourself, say the words in Sanskrit whilst you meditate. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. And keep focusing on your breath.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. 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 Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha.
Invoking Ganesh helps to clear blockages, helps to remove stagnant energy, helps us to clear out the old. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Listen to the words, saying them silently in your mind and focusing on your breath.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. 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 Om Gam Ganapataye Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam.
When you are ready, start to let the practice go. Come back to your normal pace of breath and gently open your eyes, bringing movement back into your body.
Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha.
As your day progresses, try to keep the mantra with you, Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, and that will help you to release anything that you need to let go of. In conclusion, perhaps the most important thing we need to do is know when to get help, and then to get that help. Whether that's by confiding in a friend or relative that we are struggling and seeking their assistance in finding professional help, or whether that's going straight to get professional help. The National Alliance on Mental Illness has a section called Personal Stories, where people sometimes anonymously share their stories. I found one such story and it goes like this. It hits you all of a sudden. It's the middle of the day, you're surrounded by friends and the sun is out, but something isn't right. There is this feeling, a very uncomfortable feeling in your mind, in the pit of your stomach. You want to leave and you want to go somewhere that is quiet and dark. You are being consumed by your own thoughts, so dark and so horrid, you are afraid. It's wrecking you from the inside out. The author of that story says that one of the things that gets them through those dark moments is remembering a quote by Rupi Kaur. And here you are living, despite it all. The author continues with their story and says of the quote, a quote that always inspired me, even through those dark days when I decided I couldn't do it anymore, couldn't carry on living. To all those suffering deep inside, pushing those feelings to the back of your brain, the bottom of your heart, please keep on living. Please remember that no matter how distant your future may seem, no matter how distant love may seem, it will always be there. Never lose hope. I know it's easy to. We are rocks in a sea of chaos. We cannot let every storm knock us around. We simply must not. If any of the topics that I have discussed today have affected you, please reach out to someone, whether that's a friend or to a professional support service. Infinite Mind Care provides counselling services and can be reached on 926-0882. The Alex Panton Foundation offers support to people up to the age of 30, and their information is available on alexpantonfoundation.ky. Loud Silent Voices provides mental health support too, and their number is 922-3847, and their email is info@lsv.support. Tune in to my show, Shuvra Deb with you, every Thursday at 2 p.m, right here on Bobo FM 89.1 in the Cayman Islands. And for those of you listening on the podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple and Google, for you guys, if you want to catch my show as it drops first here on the radio, be sure to tune in. You can find me online every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Bobo FM 89.1 at dmsbroadcasting.ky. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Bye for now. Thank you all so much for tuning in and for listening to Shuvra Deb with you. And please do tune in every Thursday at 2 p.m. on Bobo FM 89.1 for more topics related to and relevant to mental health. If any of you would like to reach out to me directly about any of the issues I've discussed, please do email me at shuvradeb82@gmail.com. That's spelt SHUVRADEB, the numbers 82 @gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening.